Alright, I guess it's finally time to do this. For the second time at least. You see, I wanted to make this video around a month and a half ago, so I made the whole tier list, did the recording, but then it turns out I had some kind of auditorial issue, which basically means large chunks of the videos was unwatchable. So I hope that doesn't happen in this recording session. So, what up YouTube? It's Luca and welcome to probably one of the largest projects I've ever done. Today I'm going to be ranking or making the ultimate tier list of the tameable creatures in Ark. You know, Ark Survival Ascended is coming out supposedly at the end of this month. So if I'm gonna do this video at any point in my life, then I have to do it now. So yeah, before you ask, I did not lie in the thumbnail. Here you have proof. This was taken from the Ark Survival Evolved game on my PS5. It actually logs how many hours you have, and as you can see, I have more than 6,500 hours. Most of those are in single player though, so I can't comment too much on the PvP aspects of certain creatures, but I'll try my best to include the little bits that I do know. I'm going to be going through these creatures quite quickly because we have a lot of them to cover. I believe the first time I did this, the total recording came out to be like 2.5 hours, which might be how long this video is. I should probably preface it by saying that this is a tier list based on how useful each of the creatures are when they're tamed. So, you know, we're not going to be ranking them based on design. I'm purely just going to rank them on, okay, how strong or how useful are they in the game? You know, do they provide something unique to them, or can they easily be replaced? Stuff like that. So yeah, before I embark on this long journey, let me first ask you to, you know, support this video if you like it and you found it useful. If you want to do that by subscribing, liking or commenting, I don't really care what you do, as long as it makes us both happy. So yeah, with that out of the way, there is one more thing that I need to do. At the bottom here I have this tier that is named I don't know. You know, I took a break from the game in the first half of this year, and therefore I missed the release of certain creatures. So yeah, there's going to be a couple creatures that I can't really comment on because I haven't played with them enough. I haven't tamed them so I don't really know how they work. This is going to be the Charkar Dontosaurus. Yeah, that's going to be Fenrir as well. And I think beyond that, it's only the Fjordhawk. Where is it? And the big giant bug. Starts with an R. Where's the R in the alphabet? Alright, so these are the 4 creatures that I haven't tamed at all, and thus I can't really comment on their usefulness. But all the others, I feel relatively confident that I know what I'm doing when talking about them. So let's begin. We are ranking these mostly alphabetically. At the end I threw in a few creatures after the fact. You know, I put them all in here and then I thought, oh, I missed this and this creature that maybe should be in it. So yeah, but for the most part this is an alphabetical list, which means first up is the snail. So let's start our long and possibly egregious journey with the Achatina, the snail that produces cementing paste passively. That's definitely pretty useful. I think I'm gonna put him in the B tier. I mean, this guy is quite a demanding tame. Like, you have to constantly produce veggie cakes for them to eat, but you get some useful benefits in return. I mean, there are definitely other ways of getting cementing paste, which, depending on the circumstances, might be more effective, such as raiding beaver dams and killing insects with the frog. But you know, these guys can still pull their weight. They're nothing crazy or anything. They're just useful to have around. Next is the aloe. I think the aloe might also be in the B tier, maybe higher than the snail. They're kind of just a pretty generic carnivore, but they do have their unique pack mechanic, where the leader can get access to a special bleed mechanic, which I guess is cool and sets them apart. But you know, they're still outclassed by some of the bigger carnivores. Like, yeah, that's kind of the thing. Most of the carnivores are just, you know, meant for battle, and thus they get outclassed by each other very quickly. The herbivores have that too, kind of, but they often have some more varied uses. So yeah, just a heads up for that. But yeah, aloe, solid B tier creature, nothing wrong with it. It's just, you know, it kind of falls off as you start to tame the bigger carnivores. I guess the one upside is that you can bring them into certain caves. Next up is the Amargasaurus. I haven't played with this thing too much, but it seems to be more of a support type creature, which in single player isn't really that useful, but in PvP it's probably a pretty valuable asset, so I think I might put this thing also in the B tier, but ahead of the other two, because of its spikes that can negate the enemy's armor and set them on fire and freeze them as well. Especially the armor breaking ones and the freezing ones I feel like are really useful in PvP. This thing is a pain to tame, but you know, once you've tamed it, you have a pretty good creature. But next up is the Andrewsarchus. So the first time I did this guy was down here in the I don't know rank. But you know, after I came back from vacation, my interest in the game flared up again, and I started, you know, my first playthrough on Fjordur. But yeah, I tamed one of these guys and they seem to be pretty good, you know. They are a carnivore, but they don't really specialize in battle. Not themselves, it's mostly their saddle that is a really potent combat tool. And these guys are also excellent like traveling mounts, so I feel like this guy is probably gonna go in A tier. They are kind of a pain to tame, but compared to certain other creatures it's not even that bad. So yeah, next up is the anglerfish. I desperately want this thing to be good, but I think I'm just gonna put it in the C tier. This guy has one thing that it's good at, and it is harvesting the silicia pearls. It's a really efficient harvester of those things, and that's kind of all it does. It's not really great in combat or for transportation underwater. So yeah, then the Ankylosaurus. I think I'm not really going to be surprising anyone that this is our first S tier. It's a very potent harvester of metal, sulfur, you know, salt, obsidian, and basically all the mineral resources. You can gather that very efficiently with an Ankylosaurus, and that's good because those resources are some of the most important in the game. You will need a lot of it as you progress into the mid and late game, and therefore an Ankylosaurus is a really valuable creature. Everybody wants one of these guys, and that's for a good reason. Then next up is the spider. Spider is kind of it's kind of sad. I'm gonna put it in the C tier. I'm not gonna put it in the D tier. The D tier is reserved for the stuff that is especially bad. You know, the stuff where I would question why would you tame this. But the spider, you know, is not useless by any means. If you had the choice between nothing and a spider, you would still choose a spider and you could get marginal value out of it. But yeah, this guy is really underwhelming. It's not really great at fighting. The only thing unique it has is its little web string shot that reduces your speed for a little bit. But outside of that, they're just kind of really weak and you can easily kill them. They are just kind of meant to be a support creature in combat, and even at that, it's not remarkable by any means. Now the Archaeopteryx. This guy is a little dubious because it's been almost entirely outclassed by the cinema crops. I guess we could do these two together. So yeah, I think the Cinemacrops is probably an S tier creature, because it basically just lets you as the player fly, and that basically entirely outclasses the Archaeopteryx, whose main purpose is to, you know, soften your fall by letting you glide. But with the Cinemacrops, you have a lot more utility, you know. You can't just glide, you can also just straight up fly, you know, go up. You can also just glide with this thing. It has a special glide mode, where it basically does the exact same thing as the Archaeopteryx, and the Cinemacrops also has a special screech, which can scare away creatures. So the Archaeopteryx is basically wholly outclassed by this thing. On its own, it's still not a bad shoulder pad. I think I'd probably put it in the low B tier. Next up is the Argentavis. I think the Argentavis might just be the best creature up until this point. It's a really useful creature as well, because, you know, in combat it's fine. I never really use Argentavis primarily for combat, but where these guys excel is that they're excellent transportation mounts, because, you know, remember what I said in the Ankylosaurus section, that, you know, certain types of stuff like metal, for example, you're gonna need a lot of later on in the game. Well, these guys excel at transporting such resources, because the stuff like metal actually get reduced in weight when put in the Argentavis inventory, and thus they can transport a lot more metal than other creatures who technically have a higher base weight stat, and their stamina and speed are also not too bad. And like I said before, they're also fine in combat. So all in all, this is just an incredibly well-rounded creature. So then we have the Arthropleura. This guy is also a little dubious, because it's a lot better in PvP, the mode that I don't play, compared to single player, which is the mode where I do play. I think overall I'm probably going to put it somewhere in the B tier, probably here for now, because of, you know, their special spitball attack, which does massive damage to armor of opposing players. So yeah, like I said before, in single player that's kind of useless, but in PvP that's probably way more useful when you have other players running around. So yeah, they are also kind of expensive to tame. You have to create a broth of enlightenment. You know, it's kind of a weird taming food. I never really thought about that much. So yeah, then we have the two space whales, the Astrocetus and the Astrodelphis. I think these guys are both probably gonna go in the A tier. Yeah, the Astrocetus is just a massive tank that can also deal massive damage, with basically its one massive downside is that, you know, you can only unlock and tame it, or I guess you can technically tame it before you basically finish Genesis, but you only unlock its saddle after you beat the final boss. And as such, I think there's not really much to taming this guy, since, you know, you've already beaten the map by the time you can utilize its full potential. I think the Astrodelphis is better in this regard, you know. It's weaker in combat, but you can get it much earlier on Genesis 2. And its saddle is also pretty useful, basically acting as a fighter jet that can also shoot like plasma projectiles. And it's very maneuverable. So yeah, both of these guys are pretty great in combat, though I would say the Astrocetus is definitely the better in combat, at least. I think the Astrodelphis is better for transportation. And then next up we have the Baryonyx, which is an unfortunate victim of the fact that all images had to be the same size. But anyway, the Baryonyx is also a very good creature. I'm not sure whether I should put it behind or in front of the Andrewsarchus. I think I'd put the Baryonyx just behind the Andrewsarchus, because it does have its limitations, mainly that it's not that strong and also not that tanky. But you know, most people tame Baryonyx to go into caves with, which they excel at, because for their size they are still pretty tanky and do decent damage, and they're also good in the water, which is good. So yeah, there's not really much more to say. It's just, you know, Just like the Arks and Tavis, it's a well-rounded creature. And with the Basilisk, I think the Basilisk is also A tier. I think I'm gonna put it ahead of all these guys. I think the Basilisk is underrated. You know, it is expensive to tame, requiring Rock Drake or Magmasaur eggs. But you know, once you can make your way into the nesting area, it becomes kind of easy to just farm them. And then, you know, it doesn't matter what level egg you feed it, so you can just feed all the low levels to it. Yeah, and beyond that, this guy has a lot of areas in which he excels. He's pretty good in combat, with, you know, its one flaw being that its hitbox is all the way in the center of its body. So, you know, when creatures come up all inside, you know, your model to attack you, the Basilisk can sometimes struggle to hit them while, you know, it is still being damaged itself. But yeah, luckily it also has a long-range spitball attack, which it shares with the Poison Wyvern. And it's also pretty good for transportation because it can burrow its way underground, which grants you, you know, semi-invisibility. And also this thing's base weight is pretty good. So yeah, it's almost a perfect creature. It's just that some of the hitbox issues hold it back. And then the Basilosaurus, yeah, I think we're on a streak because I think this is also an A tier creature. I think I'll put it right over here. Yeah, the Basilosaurus is probably the ocean creature that is the strongest, you know, relative to how easy it is to tame, because taming this thing isn't really all that special. And of course, the flaw of this guy is that it can't go too deep underwater or it'll start taking damage. But the upside is that when it's close to the surface, it heals very quickly, so it's very resilient. And, you know, adding to that resilience is its huge health pool. It's a tank and it can output decent damage, nothing special. But yeah, because of that, it is still able to take down some of the stronger creatures in the ocean, which, like I said, makes it incredibly useful, given that you can tame it pretty early on in your adventure. So yeah, then the frog. I think the frog's probably high B tier. Yeah, I'll put him here. Of course, the main draw of this thing is that you can harvest cementing paste by killing bugs, which, you know, is a pretty reliable and renewable source of cementing paste if you go up and down to the swamp. But yeah, beyond that, the frog is a little below average. You know, its attacks do inflict torpor, but it's pretty frail, and its attacks, when, you know, not using it against bugs, are not going to do a lot of damage. It's similar to the anglerfish, where it has one niche that it fills extremely well, but outside of that it's kind of underwhelming. Yeah, but the frog does have more upsides than the anglerfish. It's also pretty good for transportation with its long jump, so I guess that's nice. So next up we have the Blood Crystal Wyvern, and I guess we'll throw in the other crystal wyverns as well. We have the Ember and the tropical one here. So I think the Blood Crystal Wyvern out of the three is pretty convincingly the best because of its lifesteal attack. Yeah, I think I'll place him here. It has its lifesteal attack, which it can basically just unleash upon a group of enemies to heal large amounts of HP. So yeah, that kind of makes it incredibly resilient in combat, which is what makes it the best. The other two are less good, but they're still good. I think I will probably put both of them at the top of B tier. So yeah, the Ember one is basically just a fire breath, but it starts out weaker and you can increase its strength by using it repeatedly, which is interesting, but like I said, inferior to the Blood Crystal Wyvern. And the tropical one can get a hydration boost, which I always thought that was kind of stupid, given that, you know, when you go too deep into the water, the flyer you're on will just dismount you. So yeah, but their special attack is that they throw steam all over the target, which, you know, leaves you with like a burn, which does damage for a little bit afterwards, and it leaves you slowed. So yeah, I don't know which one is the worst out of these two. Like I said, the Blood Crystal Wyvern is pretty convincingly the best. But I think these two for me are about equal. And they're still good, like I said. And then we have the Bloodstalker. This thing is weird. It's amazing for transportation, but sometimes the game itself has a little trouble keeping up. And in combat against smaller creatures it's really good because it can just grab them and just eat them when they can't do anything back. But against bigger creatures this thing really struggles. I think ultimately it's still going to be a high B tier or low A tier creature. Yeah, you know what? I think I'll put it ahead of the Baryonyx. Just because of the way... just because it can get around so easily. Then we have the Brontosaurus. I feel really sad for this thing. People never tame it, except for me. But yeah, I like this guy, but it's not that good. It's probably gonna be the best creature in C tier. Maybe it could be low B tier. Yeah, I'll put it in low B tier. So the problem is with the Bronto is that it can't really do much given the costs for taming it. Because this guy requires a lot of food to tame, even kibble. And what you get is just, well, one of the best berry gatherers in the game. And it's also not really that great at fighting back. It has its tail swipe as its only attack, which does moderate damage and lots of knockback to smaller creatures. But against bigger creatures like a Rex, it's going to struggle. Yeah, it's just kind of underwhelming given its size and, like I said, what it takes to tame it. I just realized I forgot to zoom in. And next up we have the Bulbdog, and I'll throw in all the other light pets as well. So we have here the Glowtail, and then the Shinehorn is somewhere down here. Here we go. So yeah, all of the different light pets excel in something. The Bulbdog has the highest base charge. The Featherlight has the highest base emission range. The Glowtail has the highest base regeneration and thus also the slowest draining of the charge when it is turned on. And the Shinehorn is just kind of the jack of all trades, you know, master of none. So yeah, out of the four, I think the Bulbdog is probably the best because, you know, of its charge capacity. So this guy can stay on for a really long time, which is kind of, you know, all that you're looking for a light pet. You want this thing to stay on as long as possible. I think the Featherlight is probably the worst one. We're probably gonna throw that next to the Archaeopteryx. No, actually even below the Bronto. And then the Glowtail and the Shinehorn are kind of equal to me. So I don't know, we'll find a space for them somewhere in the middle. Alright, then the Carbonaemis, the turtle. This guy is also just kind of underwhelming. It doesn't really excel at anything. Yeah, its shell kind of protects it from damage from projectiles, but it's very easy to just aim for its feet. And also against, you know, just other dinos that bite at you, it's not gonna receive any damage reduction. So in the water, it's pretty slow in the water, which is kind of a shame because this guy is kind of meant to be a hybrid mount that, you know, can be used both on land and in water. But both on land and in water, it's very slow and weak. Then the Carnotaurus. I think the Aloe is definitely better, but then the question is, where am I gonna place this guy? I think I'll place him ahead of the Arthropleura. It's just kind of your standard carnivore, which can do a bleed attack that is worse than the Aloe when you have it in a pack of 3. But, you know, it's still something. Next up is the Castroides, the giant beaver. And this might be a controversial opinion, but I think this guy is also going in the S tier. I think this guy is... Well, I was gonna say this guy is the best wood gatherer, but it's not. We'll get to them later. But I think this guy is still a phenomenal wood gatherer. You know, it's very fast in the water. The wild ones create beaver dams, which I guess is kind of a trait of this creature. Even though, yeah, no, it's not really a tamed trait that the tamed ones have. So I guess I'm not really counting that, but even beyond that, like I said, they are pretty fast, have good mobility in the water, and they're excellent wood gatherers. And wood is an essential resource. I wouldn't really say that it's as useful as something like the Ankylosaurus. Next up is the Chalicotherium. This guy is also a little bit weird. Let's see. I think he's better than the Carno. I think I'll put this guy slightly above the Carno because it has its rock throw attack. It is, it does require a very specific taming food, that being beer, which I've always thought was kind of weird. But yeah, once you've tamed it, you get a creature that can harvest berries and is also decent in combat. So yeah, it's just kind of an all-rounder. That brings us to the fish. You know how I said the D tier was reserved for stuff that I wouldn't know why you would tame it? This is the first example. I don't know why you would tame a fish. And this guy is actually tameable. You know, don't blow up at me. You can tame this, the fish and all the other creatures like the leech and the lamprey. You can tame them with the fish basket that you can get on Aberration. So they do count. But like I said before, I don't know why you would tame a fish. Alright, next up is the Compy. This guy is also kind of underwhelming. I mean, if you have a group of them, I guess you could do some damage. But on their own, they're really weak. And, you know, they're designed as a shoulder pad, but, you know, if you want to tame them in the early game, you have to get prime meat, which is kind of difficult to get in the early game, especially. So, yeah, and by the time you can gather prime meat efficiently, you probably don't need these guys anymore. You already have better carnivores, so yeah. This guy also kind of got screwed over in life. Now the Daedon, I think the Daedon is probably in the S tier as well because it can heal. There are other creatures that can heal like the Snow Owl, but the Daedon can do it passively, which is a massive help in certain scenarios, like boss fights. You know, the situation where most people use this guy for specifically, bringing him into boss battles and having him heal all your attacking creatures while they are taking a beatdown from the boss. And it is very good at that, which is why it's in the S tier. You know, it's similar to the anglerfish where it has one niche where it excels, and for the rest it's not really that special of a creature. But in the Daedon's case, the niche it fills is so useful and generally splashable that just being passive healing, yeah, compared to the anglerfish, that it warrants a spot in the S tier. Next up is the Deinonychus. I think this guy is probably going in the A tier, though I think on the lower end, I think. Yeah, so basically the general rule with the Deinonychus is the more HP your target has, the more useful the Deinonychus is going to be, because they have a bleed that deals percentual damage. So against bosses, these guys can also absolutely shred, because, you know, they can do massive damage to bosses with their bleed. And outside of that, they're fine, you know, pack animals, traveling mounts. They have a low base weight, which kind of holds them back from, you know, filling those exploration transport roles. But I would say they're still above average. So yeah, next up is the Desert Titan. So, you know, we're ranking these guys by how useful they are. The Titans are going to be ranked among themselves. And the Desert Titan is definitely the weakest of the three Titans. I'm going to put him at the top of B tier. It's the only one of the three that can fly, which I guess it is useful. It can summon lightning strikes, it can send the flock in, and you can build on the back of it. But that's all just to compensate for the fact that it is pretty weak. I mean, at least compared to the other Titans, compared to a normal creature, it is still ridiculously strong. But you have to go to quite the lengths to tame this guy. Next up is the Desmodus. Now, I haven't played around with this thing too much. I only tamed a high level one on Fjordur, like yesterday. But I think they're definitely like A tier creatures. I think they are better than the Andrewsarchus. Better than the Blood Crystal Wyvern also. Well, maybe not. Yeah, maybe just better. I'm gonna place them here for now as like a transportation mount, and you know, in combat they're not too useful in both roles. You know, they don't excel or anything. They're merely just okay. But they do have a lot of utility, you know, with their echolocation, being able to sense creatures. Being able to fly in caves is also a huge bonus for these guys, given none of the other flyers can do that. And of course, being able to produce the Sanguine Elixir in their inventory is also a massive bonus for this creature's usefulness. So yeah, you know, on the surface, this guy might seem a little bit underwhelming once you tame it, but the more you start to use it, the more you will see its potential unleashed. Alright, then the Dilophosaur. The Dillo is... I've always liked the Dillo. I think it's a fine early game creature. I'm gonna put it here, probably. Yeah, for an early game creature, it's completely fine. It doesn't do anything special. And, you know, it's weak. It doesn't do a lot of damage. It does have its special spit, which, you know, obscures the target's vision for a lot and slows them down. Beyond that, it kind of falls off hard as you start to tame more, you know, better carnivores. Even a raptor basically completely outclasses this thing. I guess you could lead a pack of these behind a raptor. Yeah, the Dimetrodon. This guy is also kind of sad. Would I say he's better than the Comfy? I would. This guy basically has one use to act, and it is to act as a living air conditioning. But you can also just build an actual air conditioner to, you know, incubate your eggs and such. These guys take up much more space than a single air conditioning and basically do the exact same thing. So yeah, this guy basically gets outclassed by a piece of metal. Alright, the Dimetrodon. As far as shoulder pads go, I would say this is one of the better ones. I think I'm probably gonna put him in the A tier. There we go. Yeah, I mean, it can fly, it can be annoying. For a creature that small, it actually does respectable damage. And you know, it can bite off your shoulder to help you in close quarters combat, which is pretty useful, and they're generally pretty easy to tame. Then the Dinopithecus. I think this guy might be a little overrated. Yeah, in a pack they can do a lot of damage, but on their own, I don't think they're special. I don't think they're really special on their own. I believe the first time I did this, I placed them in the A tier, but later moved them down to the bottom of A tier, or maybe even to B tier. Yeah, I think I will probably place them here in the relatively high B tier. I mean, they can be, like I said before, they can be strong in packs, but on their own, they are kind of weak. They're not weak, they're a little underwhelming. They can be a little underwhelming. They can climb walls, which I guess is nice and puts them above pack animals like the Elo. The Diplocalus, I like this guy, but it's not that good. I mean, it has an interesting niche of basically being a rideable, portable oxygen tank underwater. But this guy's downsides are also substantial. You can't ride it above the water. You have to lead it into water first and then you can hop on. And also this guy is pretty weak, both in terms of health pool and the damage that it deals. But it has one niche that it fulfills extremely well. But outside of that, it's just an underwhelming creature. Speaking of that, the Diplodocus. Probably gonna go at the bottom of C tier. It's not completely useless, it's not going in D tier, but I don't see why you would ever tame a Diplodocus. It can deal damage, it can only knock things back. So, you know, yeah, this guy would basically lose to every single creature if they were to attack it. So yeah, that's kind of just sad. And I mean, its saddle is unique, having space for up to 10 people, but in single player, which is where I play, that's not really a useful thing. Okay, the dire bear. I feel like the dire bear is pretty useful. I think he'll probably go somewhere in the B tier. It's pretty strong in combat for its size, and it has its special ability where it can harvest honey without being attacked. So I don't know where to place it. I think I'll place it just behind the aloe. And then the dire wolf. This guy's fine, I guess. I will put him, I'll put him between the Chalicotherium and the Carno. Yeah, these guys are fine. In packs, they are really strong. And yeah, outside of that, they're just, a mid-game creature. Not really much special, just, a combatant. The Dodo is the best creature in Ark. It's overpowered. It's a shame that they didn't introduce a final update to nerf it. And then the Dodo Rex is even more overpowered. I mean, the Dodo Rex is technically tameable because, on Thanksgiving they often do events where you have to kill turkeys to collect wishbones. And you can use those to make special skins, but you can also use those to summon a Dodo Rex, which will be tamed to you for 30 minutes and then disappear. So that technically qualifies it for this list. And, it's absolutely insane because it has 666,000 health. And its damage isn't even that insane. It does have the fire breath. But yeah, this is one of the strongest pure battle creatures in the game. Alright, the Doedicurus. Also the best gathering creature of a certain resource. This time it's stone. And beyond that, it can roll, which, at least helps it moving around. Because this guy can be kind of slow on the land. In water, it's actually surprisingly quick. There are others, probably, who can rival it. Like the Rock Elemental. I do have the Rock Elemental on here, right? Oh yeah, here he is. But yeah, the Doedicurus is the easier to tame. And, you unlock its saddle sooner. And it generally gets the job done beautifully. And the Dunkleosteus, I think I'm going to put him in the C tier. I would say he's definitely more useful than the anglerfish in general. What the Dunkleosteus basically does is that it's basically an underwater Ankylosaurus. It can harvest oil nodes, it can harvest metal nodes too, I believe. And also like the mushrooms on Genesis and stuff. But yeah, in combat it's just kind of okay, it's average. But where this thing really falls short is that it is horribly slow. And its stamina also runs out very quickly. Which doesn't even really matter because even in its sprinting mode, it's still horribly slow. So yeah, that kind of makes it very inefficient to take this guy around to collect metal. But so yeah, the dung beetle is really useful for setting up like plant species X defenses and making a greenhouse. And a lot of players will do that because on most maps you don't have just vegetables growing on the map. Some maps do have those locations and that does kind of take away from the dung beetle. I think in terms of usefulness, he's definitely not required. You can also like make a toilet or something. Yeah, wasn't there a glitch associated with the toilet where you can get infinite fertilizer, which kind of knocks down the dung beetle? But I would say still. No, actually, I'll put him just ahead of the bulldog. Next up is the eel, the Electrophorus. I don't think I've ever seen anyone tame these guys, but they're not useless by any means. They can shock other creatures and other players, which can debuff them. Make them really slow and reduce their damage for a few seconds. Which on paper is kind of useful, but the taming method for these guys is a little bit weird. You have to passively feed them biotoxin. And overall, it's just a hassle having to deal with these guys attacking you while you try to tame them. So yeah, I mean, I guess they're not useless by any means, so I'll put them in the B tier. So yeah, next up is the Enforcer. The Enforcer is a little bit weird because it does huge damage against corrupted creatures, but against you know, regular, non-corrupted creatures, it's just fine. I guess it is pretty good at transportation too, because it can climb up walls and it can, you know, teleport. So I guess that would probably earn it a spot somewhere in the high B tier, or maybe even the A tier actually. Yeah, you know what, I'll put it just behind the Bloodstalker. So the Equus, I think the Equus is also probably around the B rank. Yeah, I think I'll put the Equus right over here. It's a fine traveling mount. Its weight is pretty okay for its size. And of course you can make the lasso in its saddle, but that's not really that useful. I've never really found it to be that useful. And overall it's just fine. It has its back kick, which can be used to knock out creatures. But outside of like raptors and stuff, you're not really gonna be successful in doing that on bigger creatures. So yeah, this is just kind of an early to mid-game creature that falls off as you get to the end game. And we have the Exomech from Genesis 2. I haven't really played around with this thing too much. In fact, the last time I did was for my Genesis 2 review. But yeah, this thing basically can move stuff, it can pick up structures. It has like a tactical mode, which you can use to direct creatures, which is really interesting. So yeah, overall I think it's probably a solid A rank creature. I think I'm gonna put it here, just ahead of the Andrewsarchus. The Ferox, I mean, if you're not on Genesis 1 or Genesis 2, where you can farm elements really easily, this thing is kind of costly to use, because you know, elements on other maps isn't really that common. Though, you know, I guess the later maps do kind of throw element at you left, right and center. So it kind of depends on the map how useful the Ferox actually is. But yeah, I guess I can compare it to the Dinopithecus, because they share some similarities. They have like similar attack animations and they can both climb up walls. But the Ferox is stronger alone than a Dinopithecus alone. So I guess that gives it the edge. And then next up we have the Fire Wyverns, and we'll do all the other wyverns. All the other like big wyverns alongside it. So we have fire, lightning, poison and ice. So out of this bunch, I think the lightning is definitely the best. In fact, I would go as far to say that the lightning wyvern is an S tier creature. And the remaining ones, I think the ice wyvern might be the worst. I think the fire wyvern is also good. I would probably put that in, yeah, high A tier somewhere. There we go. Poison wyvern maybe low A tier somewhere, maybe like here. Now maybe I would say it's maybe a little bit higher. There we go. And then the ice wyvern, I would say I would probably put it somewhere at the top of B tier. I'll put it with the other wyverns. I think this guy is slightly better than the two tropical or the two crystal wyverns. And then the Force Titan is definitely, I feel like, an A tier creature. Let's see. I think the Ice Titan, where's the Ice Titan? You can probably do him immediately as well. He's coming up, right? So the Ice Wyvern is an S tier, I would say. But the Force Titan is an A tier. And then the Desert Titan is a B tier. I think, yeah, I'm okay putting the Forced Titan here. So the Gacha, I mean, the Gacha can produce free resources, or free, I guess you can feed them stone, which doesn't really count as free necessarily. But yeah, it still can essentially give you free resources and loot, which is really useful, though I've never really personally seen the light that is gacha farms and stuff like that. I've never really used them much at all. So I guess I'll still put him at the bottom of S tier, just because of that, you know, potential. The Gallimimus I think is all going to be a C tier creature. It is one of the better ones, though. I'll put him here. Yeah, it's basically one of the fastest creatures in Ark. And that's it. Both, you know, in combat it's both offensively and defensively, it's just pitiful. And I guess, can it get our berries? It probably can. So I guess there's that. But I believe its base weight also isn't really much special either. And also this guy is kind of difficult to tame. Its torpor drops really fast. It's just a lot of hassle for something that I don't believe is really worth it. So then the gas bags. I think the gas bags might be a little underrated. It's a really good transportation creature. When you want to transport large amounts of resources, you can use this guy, because they can fly for short distances, and they have one of the highest base weight stats in the game. So yeah, that's nice. I don't think they rise out of B tier just yet, because in combat they are kind of, you know, just inept. But I think I'm fine placing them in high B tier. Next up is the honeybee. I guess this guy's kind of equivalent to the I guess this guy's kind of equivalent to the Achatina, because they both passively produce resources that you can also get through other means out in the wild. I do think the honeybee is a little better than the Achatina, just because there are more ways of getting cementing paste in the wild than there are, you know, honey. On the other hand, cementing paste is generally more useful than honey, though I guess you could use honey for kibble. They're both kind of the same to me, but I'm gonna place the honeybee just in front of the Achatina for now. Next up we have the Giga. The Giga is, I think, an A tier creature. Yeah, I'm gonna put it here, between the Forced Wyvern and the Fire Wyvern. Or the Force Wyvern. Those are not on this list, you can tame them. But the Force Titan and the Fire Wyvern. I mean, what can I say? It's, you know, one of, if not the strongest carnivores. Yeah, it does huge damage, it has a respectable amount of health. It is a pain to tame, but, you know, compared to some of the more complex taming methods that were added in more recent times, it's nothing really special. You just gotta be patient and careful. And in return, you get a very strong creature. Okay, next up is the Gigantopithecus. So I think this guy is definitely a little overshadowed by other stuff. You know, it used to be a pretty decent gatherer of fiber. You know, you could set it to passive and then wander, and it would just wander around collecting fiber from bushes. But now, in recent times, you have the Maywing, which basically is better in gathering both fiber and berries. So this guy does still have its advantages. You can equip it with a helmet. And in combat I think it is marginally better than the Maywing, but ultimately I think I'm still gonna put it probably somewhere in B tier. Here we have the Griffin. Now I've tamed a Griffin on Fjordur and I've used it a lot. And I gotta say, I think this thing is kind of overrated. I think it might not actually be that good. Because, you know, the swoop doesn't really do that much damage. I mean, I've pumped quite a bit of levels into melee damage on my Griffin. And the swoop only does like 550-ish damage. So, yeah, I mean, and their regular attack, you know, when they're not swooping, their regular attack just sucks. You know, half of the time the damage doesn't even come out on the creature. So yeah, besides that, for transportation they're fine. But I think they're definitely worse than the Wyverns. The Hesperornis, yeah, you can tame these guys, right? I think you can. I don't know why you would though, outside of farming a golden egg, which I guess you can do that, but you know, still, that's a whole bunch of waiting around for something that's not really that great. I mean, you could also just, open an Explorer node and get an XP boost that way. So yeah, I don't really see the value in taming a Hesperornis. Now, if you want to farm golden eggs, then all the power to you, but I don't really see it. So the Hyenodon, I've always tried to tame these guys, but I haven't succeeded. Taming these guys is really frustrating, and I don't know, once you have the pack of them, they're probably pretty good, but yeah, I think they still might be a little worse off than the Aloe. I'm gonna put them above the Equus still, but taming them is really frustrating, even though it doesn't cost you anything to tame them. Their aggro is just so weird. The Ichthyornis is the bane of a lot of Ark players' existence. And once you have it tamed, you get a decent shoulder mount. I would say it's better than the Archaeopteryx, but not by much. Basically, the only thing this guy does is catch fish and bring it back to you with like a special glow. Now, I don't really know what that glow does outside of improving the taming effectiveness of, or improving just the taming process of otters in general. I don't know if the fish, also gives better quality meat if you harvest it. The Ichthyosaurus, this guy's niche, definitely. I'm gonna put him at the bottom of B tier. Yeah, it's a niche creature that, basically the only reason you tame this guy is, well, either because you don't have the resources to tame other water-based mounts, or for its one unique quality, which is that it is very fast, probably one of the fastest underwater mounts, but it's, as a transportation, its weight really falls short, and just like the Diplocalus, its damage is pitiful. Wait, why is it slightly higher than the Diplocalus actually? Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna swap them around. I think the Diplocalus is actually slightly better because this also provides you with oxygen underwater, and beyond that they're basically the same. Alright, then the Iguanodon. This guy's underrated, I think. I love this guy. I never use him, but I still think he's underrated. Yeah, this guy's, of course, one of this guy's defining characteristic is that it's on his like four-legged stance, he has infinite stamina, so he can run forever, which is kind of useful, and also he can turn berries into seeds and also vegetables into seeds, which is situationally useful. So I don't think he's gonna escape like mid B tier. Yeah, I think I'm gonna place him between the Carno and the Artho. Right, the Jerboa, I mean, this guy is essential on Scorched Earth. On other maps, he's just kind of negligible. Yeah, so in general, I think the Archaeopteryx is still better. I think the Dillo is as well. The Kairuku, I don't really know why you would tame this guy. I guess you could start like a polymer farm with this thing, which is respectable, I would say. But I don't really see how that is superior over just, going to the iceberg and killing the wild ones. So yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I guess it is something that you could do, though I personally wouldn't do it. Then the Capro, also the bane of many Ark players' existence. But the Capro, I feel like the Capro is fine. I feel like it might be slightly worse than the Direwolf. The Carno, yeah, I think it's worse than the Carno. Yeah, I think it's just behind the Carno. It's another carnivore, but this one is pretty useful in the swamp environments. It can swim pretty fast, it's pretty useful in the water, and of course it has its lunge, which in PvP you can rip players straight off their mount, which is probably useful. But yeah, in single player it's not really much better than, just a direwolf or a raptor. The Carcanos, I think the Carcanos belongs somewhere in the A tier. I think I'm gonna put him between the Bloodstalker and the Poison Wyvern. It can use its claws to pick up smaller creatures, which can be really useful in both combat and when you're taming it, because you can just, pick up something with the carcanos and, dismount and just shoot at it until it's knocked out and it won't go anywhere. So yeah, that's definitely really useful. And, in both combat and transportation, these guys are, I would say, above average. They do decent damage, they have a lot of health, and they of course have their massive jump, which can help them get around. So the Kentrosaurus, this guy is weird. I've always wanted to experiment with this guy, see if I can make him work against a super powerful opponent. Because this guy does recoil based on how much damage he takes. But ultimately, I've never really found it worthwhile to tame one of these guys. I would say I'd rather have an Iguanodon. Now the Lamprey. I would put this in the D tier with the fish, but yeah, taming a Lamprey may actually be useful. The Lamprey is basically just an aberrant leech, but when it leeches onto you, it also gives you temporary protection from radiation. So if you don't have a hazmat suit, you can use one of these guys, let them latch onto you, and then go into the radiation zone on aberration. So you could potentially tame some of these guys and have them, sit around your base. And then, once you go into the radiation zone, you set one of them to aggressive and unclaim it, so it sticks to you. That is a niche. So taming this guy is definitely not completely useless. But it is still far inferior to just gathering the resources to make up a hazmat suit. So yeah, I'm gonna say it's still more useful than taming a Hesperornis. Yeah, then the leech, I'm gonna put in D tier. I guess on PvP you could tame the infected leeches and maybe set those loose in your enemy's base. But that's kind of the nichest of niche usages, and outside of that, a leech is never really deadly. It's annoying at best, unless there's a whole bunch of them, like 20 in the swamp cave or something. But yeah, not really that useful. Wouldn't recommend trying to tame a leech. Leopleurodon is weird, very weird. This guy's a temporary tame. You can only have one for, half an hour or an hour. And it gives you a special buff when you have one nearby that improves loot quality. It doesn't really improve it, it just reshuffles it, so you can get different loot, which doesn't really always work out in your favor. So because it's not a strict improvement, I feel like this guy's not gonna escape the B tier. Yeah, I think he might be on the lower end even. I'll put him just ahead of the Archaeopteryx. The Lymantria. Yeah, the Lymantria is... Now I would say it's definitely not useless by any means, but it is a very weird flyer. It can't attack, similar to the Diplodocus, but at least this guy can do something useful in combat. It can drop its spores, which causes other creatures to be slowed down, and if there's a player caught in there, they will have all their water drained as well, which especially on Scorched Earth, it can be really effective. And it's also decently fast, but its stamina often leaves a lot to be desired, as does its weight. So I think it's going to be on the lower end of B tier. Yeah, I would say it's better than the Jerboa. It's more useful on average. It's probably going to go here. The Lystro... listen. I think the Lystro isn't really useful. If we're judging this purely on usability, the Lystro belongs probably somewhere here. When you pet this guy, it gives a temporary XP boost to all the creatures in the vicinity, which isn't really that useful. I mean, you have to be petting it constantly, every few minutes to keep up the boost. And you can't really take this guy out to try and kill something big to actually take advantage of the XP boost. And even the passive increase in XP gain is not really that useful even. So yeah, it's very cute, but Unfortunately, this is a tier list based on usefulness. Maywing. I think the Maywing is one of the best traversing creatures in Ark. Yeah, I put it above all of these guys. I would even go as far as to say I put it above an Argentavis. It can fly, it just glides, but it can build up some insane speed with that. And its weight is also respectable for its size. And I guess in combat it kind of falls flat. But this guy has one of the best mobility. Some of the best mobility in the entire game. Then the Magmasaur I think is probably an A tier creature. I don't think I would consider it better than a Fire Wyvern, but I would consider it to be slightly better than a Basilisk. Yeah, I mean, you have to steal eggs to get this Magmasaur. And once it grows up, you have a creature that is pretty tanky. Its melee attacks are a little bit underwhelming, you know, they're very slow. But the main draw of this guy is its Spitball attack. Its fiery Spitball attack that does massive damage to everything it hits and also functions like a frag grenade. So it splits into more fireballs that also can deal respectable damage. So yeah, if you're wanting to barrage enemies from afar, this guy is definitely the way to go. And also it can smelt stuff inside its inventory, which is also really handy, especially since you need metal bars or just metal ingots to actually use the Spitball attack. So, and the Mammoth. A lot of people like the Mammoth, think it is really useful. I don't understand why. People think it's a wood gatherer. I also don't know why. Whenever I use this thing, it mainly just seems to gather thatch over wood. So yeah, as a thatch gatherer, this guy's fine. But you know, thatch isn't really, I would say thatch, of all the resources, is probably the one resource that you aren't really gonna tame a specific creature to gather. You know, most of the time your wood gatherers can gather enough thatch for you to get by. So yeah, I mean, in combat this guy is better than it used to be. You know, you have the special saddle with the drum that I don't think I've ever used in single player, but maybe people on PvP get some mileage out of that one. And it of course has its little roar, which intimidates opponents, so it's kind of a support slash gathering creature. I think it will still place maybe near the top of B tier. Yeah, you know what? I would take one Mammoth over a single Allosaurus. There we go. So, Manigarmor. Man, this thing has had a rough journey in Ark. When it came out as part of the Extinction DLC, it was one of the most overpowered creatures in the game. And then it got nerfed. And then it got nerfed. And then it got nerfed again. And then it was, you know, a pretty decent creature. It wasn't overpowered anymore. It was strong, but nothing overwhelming. But then for some reason they just kept nerfing it. And now I would say it's still good. I wouldn't call it S tier. I wouldn't even call it A tier anymore. Because of, you know, its nerf to its mobility. It can't really do the dashes forward and sidewards as much anymore. So I would say it's still one of the better creatures in B tier. Would I take this thing over a Wyvern? I don't think I would, but it still places just behind him in the higher echelons of B tier. Alright, the Manta. Or sorry, the Manta. I said it the Dutch way. This guy is also definitely niche, but it can work. I would say it's better than the Electro Force. I would say it's also better than the Limantria. Yeah, I'll place it here. So yeah, I mean, the Mantis is the only, you know, water-bound creature that can technically go on land. Though the second you hit land, you're gonna start taking massive damage, so you can't stay on land for too long. And overall, it's kind of just an upgraded version of the Ichthyosaurus. in the sense that it's very fast. It still doesn't have a lot of weight, but this thing is better in combat. It does more damage. It still doesn't have a lot of health, but you know, it's a marginal upgrade at least. Oh, now we have the Mantis. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. You know, the Mantis is probably my favorite creature in the entire game, just because of how versatile it is. You know, you can slap some swords on them and start doing massive damage. You can slap some, you know, pickaxes and hatchets on them, and even sickles, and start gathering every resource in the world. You know, I built a massive base on Fjordur, and I didn't even tame any Ankylosaurus, Doedicurus, Castaroides, or any gathering creatures. I just tamed 2 Mantis. These guys are insane, and yeah, really versatile. Like I said, it's why they're my favorite creature in the game. And offensively, they can also do really well with some investment into their melee damage and some good swords. You know, there's that clip from one of my streams that I always refer back to in some of these Ark videos. Here we go. Oh, look at them! Look at how much damage they're doing. Yeah, that is how crazy a Mantis can get. And let's move on. The Mega Shellon. This guy's weird. I feel like I say that with every other creature now, but the Mega Shellon is a little bit weird to rank. Yeah, I would say it's probably a pretty good creature. You know, it's absolute torture to try and tame this guy, but once you do, you have a pretty decent creature. It's got a lot of health, it does decent damage, which actually surprised me, and you can build on the back of it. So yeah, you can even go with on land with it. I would say it wouldn't be entirely out of place at the bottom of A tier. Now the Megalania. I hate to say it again, but the Megalania is also weird. It can climb any surface, it can climb upside down, you know, vertical. It can also walk normally on the ground if that's what you want. And it is decently fast at doing it. It doesn't do a lot of damage and doesn't have great health. So yeah, in combat against other creatures, it's nothing special. But against other players, it can infect them with Mega Rabies, which is an incredibly dangerous disease. Do the tamed ones also do that, right? But yes, creatures it's probably akin to the Arthropleura, in the sense that in PvP it's probably more useful. So yeah, they're gonna chill there together. Next up we have the deer. If you're gonna tame any creature for gathering fetch, tame this one. Yeah, the females are very fast, one of the fastest creatures in the game, but they can't attack at all. The males are a little slower, but can attack and gather fetch. So yeah, like I said, if you're gonna tame any creature to gather fetch specifically, tame one of these guys. Yeah, I mean, they're not as essential as these 3 guys up here, for me personally, but I would say they're still useful enough to put somewhere in the lower A tier, I would say. Yeah, I would say they're just behind the Baryonyx for me. The Megalodon I feel like is also A tier, ever since it's got its little buff. It now gets a pack bonus. This guy right here, this is the real deal if you want to take out some high health opponents. Just get a pack of these and they'll become incredibly resilient and deal a lot of damage. So yeah, they're definitely better than the giant turtle. They're better than the Baryonyx, I would say. So next up is the Megalosaurus. On average, these guys are just fine. On aberration, they excel, but you know, this is just general usability that we're talking about here. So I feel like it's just maybe slightly above average. So I would say they go maybe just in front of the horse in general. The Megatherium, I would say that might also be an A tier creature. It's useful for boss fights. I'm gonna put it just behind the Deinonychus. Yeah, it's useful for certain boss fights against the Brood Mother, and it's also useful for caves, like the Baryonyx. Except this guy is, also useful in caves where there isn't any water. It's basically useful in every cave, because of the buff that it gets when it kills insects. So, yeah, definitely one of the better creatures in the game. The mech, I would say the mech is probably an S tier creature. It's probably better than the Lightning Wyvern as well. It's a fantastic combat creature, and well, that's about all there is to say about it. It's one of the strongest combat creatures in the game. It excels at both long and short range combat. The Mesopithecus, the tiny monkey. I've always felt like this guy was a little underwhelming. It's better than some of these guys for sure. I would put it here in the C tier, just behind the anglerfish. It basically sits on your shoulder. It's another shoulder mount, except this one throws poop at your opponents, which slows them down, which I guess could situationally be useful, but you'd still rather have like a Dimorphodon or a Cinnamocrops sitting on your shoulder instead. And then the Microraptor is probably very useful in PvP, also the bane of many Ark players' existence. Yeah, I mean, in single player it's not really worth ever taming any of these guys, but in PvP you can just knock people straight off their mount. So yeah, I guess that one's probably the most useful because it's very, I'm gonna put it at the top of our little PvP squad, consisting of the Arthropleura, the Megalania, and now the Microraptor. I feel like the Microraptor is probably the best among them, because it's fast and tiny, which means it's hard to hit. And it encircles the opponent as well. So yeah, in PvP, this thing can probably shred. The Morellatops. Morellatops, I've always liked these guys on Scorched Earth. They carry water around and they're decent berry gatherers. But in combat, they kind of fall flat. They're similar to other early game herbivores like the Parasaur in that regard, though I think this guy is better, both at gathering berries and being, and in combat. So yeah, I haven't ranked the Parasaur yet, but I think this guy is also probably going in B tier. Probably on the short end of it as well. And the Mosasaur, I feel like I'm gonna put it, I'll put it with the Giga, since it is basically the Giga of the ocean. The Mosasaur does have a couple more weaknesses, mainly a jellyfish that exists underwater, and the fact that it is bound to the water. The Giga is bound to land, but that's generally less of an issue than being bound to water. So yeah, that's kind of all there is to say about it. It's the Giga of the ocean. It has a platform saddle, which I guess is also nice, but I won't really know what to build on the back of it. If you're gonna build, just some shoddy structures there, they're just gonna get destroyed when you get in combat with this thing. So yeah, the Mosschops is really weird because I feel like people both underrate and overrate this creature simultaneously. I think it's fine. It definitely has its uses, but for it's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, and it's fine at doing what it does. It can gather fiber, but like I mentioned before, the Maywing is better than it. I would say it's still marginally better than the Gigantopithecus, better than the Megalania as well. Now the Noglin, I think the Noglin is probably overpowered. Well, slightly overpowered. You can just take control of any creature if you can get this thing in, which might be difficult because it's a shoulder pet and doesn't have a lot of health. But yeah, if you can get this guy in, then you can take control of anything, even your opponent's creatures. You can just barge into an enemy base or sneak into it with the Noglin, because you can control this guy. And you can just take control of your opponent's Giga in their base and just start wreaking havoc. So yeah, that's a really strong aspect of this creature, which I think that alone makes it worthy of being in the S tier. Then the Onyx. The Onyx is also kind of sad. It's like the spider, but I think this guy is slightly better. Just slightly. Yeah, I think I'll put it here. I mean, you can't ride it. It's nothing spectacular in battle. It can fly, which I would say is sort of a plus for a creature like this. But overall, it's just kind of underwhelming in all aspects when tamed. Then the Otter. The Otter has a few pretty good qualities. I would say it's low. It's probably going to be in the low A tier. It provides insulation, protection against the cold when you wear it on your shoulders. And they of course have their famous ability to hold multiple artifacts. The only creature that can do that, so if you want to farm those, you are basically obliged to bring an Otter. And beyond that, I mean, they can find like black pearls and stuff when they kill fish. Though I think not many people actually really do that. Yeah, I haven't seen anyone do that. Others just get tamed to farm artifacts and provide insulation and look cute. The Oviraptor. I don't think this guy is generally worth it to tame. I mean, they provide a boost to a dino, so they lay eggs more frequently. But the only reason you'd want eggs is to make kibble. And you can also just breed dinos to get eggs, which it's much easier than just waiting for them to randomly drop. So yeah, I don't have a high opinion on this guy. I think he honestly might go down into the C tier, but I don't feel like he's that useless. So I'll put him at the bottom of B tier right now. Next up is the Ovis, a much better creature. Obviously you can go around and just kill the wild ones, but it's generally much more reliable to tame some of them and then have them breed together to basically have mutton whenever you want. And just at your command instead of waiting for the wild ones to just spawn. Next up is the Pecky. What is this guy's full name again? The Pachycephalosaurus, I do believe. This guy is also not very strong. I would put it... Yeah, I'd probably put it around here. I mean, it's weak, it's frail. It's kind of designed as an early game mount, but even as an early game mount, there are much better options available. And I mean, its signature trait, I guess, is that it has like a charge that can inflict torpor, but even that is not really that potent. Just a simple bow with trank arrows can be better at knocking stuff out. Next up is the Pachyrhinosaurus. This guy it could be good, but it's just unnecessary. This guy has basically two abilities, one where it can draw every creature to attack it, and one where it can spew out fumes causing creatures attacking you to just ignore you. So I guess that's kinda useful. Problem is, taming these guys is very demanding. They eat bug repellent, and I do believe their torpor drops super fast. So most of the time it's just a hassle to tame this guy. I mean, a trike would probably do better than these because it can actually fight back. The Paraceratherium, I don't think this guy is that great, but he is still... Is he better than the Bronto? I mean, he costs less to tame, but he's also weaker in just about all aspects. But I think in terms of like cost to value ratio, this guy's probably slightly above the Bronto. So yeah, the Parasaur is fine. It's a fine early game mount. I would say he's slightly better than the Dillo, maybe even the Archaeopteryx. Yeah, it's a fine early game mount. It's not really that demanding to tame a Parasaur. And I mean, it's just kind of basic. I mean, ever since they gave it its buff where it can now detect enemy creatures around you, it's gotten a lot better, because now it also retains some value at, the end game, where you can just have one around and it can just sense stuff for you. So I am glad that they added that extra bit of utility to keep it useful at all stages of the game. Then the Pego, I mean the Pego is not that great. It can steal items from other players, which is highly dependent on what the player that you want to target has in their inventory. So, you know, it's like these guys. I would say, as a tame, it's probably slightly worse than the Pecky Rhinosaurs. So yeah, the Pelagornis is also kind of underwhelming. It excels at gathering polymer, but like with most of these guys down here, that's the only niche, and you know, everywhere else it's just kind of underwhelming. It's not strong, it's not particularly fast, it doesn't really have a lot of stamina or weight to be able to be an effective transportation creature. It can like swim on top of water, which is unique to it. You know, all other flyers can do that, except for like, you know, the Astro Delphis, but I don't really know if you'd consider that a flyer. The Phiomia, people basically only tame this guy to farm dino poop to feed to dung beetles. And I mean, beyond that, it's really underwhelming. So, I mean, I guess it has a useful niche that no other creature can really replicate, but I'm still going to put it at the very bottom of B tier. The Phoenix is also weird. It's, yeah, I mean, it is very rare. It's very difficult to tame. And once you have it, it's not particularly game-breaking. I mean, it can smelt stuff in its inventory, just like the Magmasaur can. And it has like a couple of fire-based attacks. It's quite fast as well, but I don't know. Most people don't really tame this one because it's just too much of a hassle. So I don't know. I guess I'll put it somewhere near the top of B tier. Right, the Piranha. I mean, I guess it's better than some of these guys. That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I would take it. I would put it somewhere here. I mean, if you could get like an army of Piranha and send it in on just like a hapless player, that would be quite fun. They are kind of a hassle to tame. You can once again tame them with the fish baskets, but they can of course break those easily because they attack back, unlike the other fish. So yeah, they're only really strong in numbers though. So yeah, that's quite a commitment. The Plesiosaur, I actually kind of like this thing. You know, most of the creatures that are like the anglerfish, and you know, to some extent the Bronto, most of them are kind of underwhelming. But I actually like the Plesiosaur. Unfortunately, it's horribly outclassed by the Mosa, the Basilosaurus, and the Tuso, which we will get to. So yeah, it doesn't see a lot of use. Most players don't bother taming this guy. Instead they go for, you know, some of the big guys of the ocean. So yeah, I'm still gonna put them probably somewhere in the middle, maybe of B tier. I'll put him just behind the Bronto. The Procoptodon, I actually think this guy is somewhat underrated. It's an excellent transportation mount. And if I could like compare it to something, I would probably compare it somewhat to the Gaspex. I think the Gaspex is still somewhat better. So yeah, I think I'll put him just behind the Dinopithecus. Yeah, it of course had its high jump, and it's quite fast as well, and its weight is not terrible. So this is like a good transportation creature. You know, I was playing on Valgero once, and all my flyers died. I don't know why. So then I had to use this thing for transportation for a bit, and in that time it really warmed up to me. So yeah, I guess that's nice. The Pteranodon, also a fine creature, I would say, as an early game like flyer. It does its job decently well, and it has an extra niche of being, you know, the fastest flyer for stealing Wyvern eggs. Or at least, you know, I don't know if it still is. There were some new flyers added. Probably the Maywing is just better. But yeah, this guy is still fine on maps that don't have the Maywing. I'm gonna put him just above the Gigantopithecus. Nah, you know what? I think he can be a little higher. The Pulminoscorpius, the giant scorpion. This guy is also kind of underwhelming. I mean, there's not really much of a use taming it, because it is sort of frail. It's basically a direwolf, but it doesn't really do any damage. Its damage output is quite low. They do have around the same health, I do believe. You know, they're both kind of mid-sized creatures. But the Scorpion can inflict torpor, which is fine, but also not really that great. Where should we put this one? Now I'm gonna say maybe low B tier, because it's not like completely useless. The Perlovia, this guy is probably a lot better on PvP, so I guess it can join the squad over here. It's probably better than the Arthro, but slightly worse than the Microraptor. You know, it can bury itself in the ground, but you know, it can't hit every player if they're on a big mount. It can't throw them off if it can't reach them. The Microraptor, I think, can reach pretty high up, so it's still better for that purpose. And also it can move around, as opposed to the Perlovia, which has to bury itself to, you know, do its ambush. The Quetzal definitely got shafted the more Ark went on. You know, when you could still level movement speed on flyers, this guy was actually pretty great. But when they took that out, it, you know, got stuck up with its horrible base speed. I think it's still a good flying transportation mount. You know, the gas bags is easier to tame, but I don't know, the Quetzal still has some neat advantages. I don't know if it's A tier quite yet. Maybe I'll put it at the bottom of A tier. There we go. The Raptor is also like a fine early to mid game mount. It's better than the Dillo, for sure. Yeah, I will put it just behind the PvP only game. The Ravager is like the Raptor but better, so I'm gonna bump him up a notch. I would say he's also better than the Direwolf. Yeah, I would say he's better than all of these guys. Yeah, I would place him here. The Reaper is probably one of my favorite creatures in the game. I would say the Reaper is like my second favorite creature in the game. And I mean, it can just do so much. It's fast, it can jump really high, it's good in combat, so you can kind of use one for whatever purpose you have in mind. It is sort of difficult to tame, but once you know what you need to do, it you know, can be quite easy to get multiple of them. So yeah. The Rex, I mean, what is there to say about the Rex? I'm probably gonna place it pretty high, or maybe not. I'm gonna put it ahead of the Andrewsarchus. I mean, the Rex is just your standard apex carnivore. Nothing wrong with it, nothing it particularly excels at. So yeah, moving on. Rock Drake, also definitely an A tier creature. Up here somewhere. I'm gonna put it just behind the Desmodus. Rock Elemental, I would say, is probably also an A tier creature. It's excellent for combat. It of course can throw its huge rock. And it has a large range because it's so big. Is it better than the Rex? Yeah, I would say so. The Rollrat is probably also a mid to high B tier creature. It's probably the only decent wood gatherer on Aberration, so I guess it has that going for it. And of course it has its special saddle, which makes it really fast. Kind of the only downside about this creature is that it has the turning radius of the freaking Titanic. And with that I mean the wreckage on the bottom of the ocean. I would say it's a better wood gatherer than the Mammoth, but it's not as great in combat. So I'll put it behind the Aloe, probably also behind the Bear. The Salmon, I guess you could tame a salmon. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, you could tame a salmon. It's kind of the same as Piranha, in that they're only strong in numbers. But they do less damage than the Piranha. And yet they do have their special variant of the Bleed, which doesn't drain health but drains stamina. And when you're underwater that can be really dangerous. But I don't really see why you would tame an army of salmon just to do that. Sabertooth, I think the Sabertooth overall is worse than the Direwolf, but yeah, I mean the Direwolf can like form a pack and the Sabertooth is just kind of all on its own, so I think it's definitely worse off for it. I've never really been a fan or huge fan of the Sabertooth. So yeah, I think it's still better than the Raptor. So I guess I'll put it ahead of it. Okay, the Sarco kind of got shafted. It's horribly outclassed by a lot of other carnivores. But, you know, on its own, it's still a fine creature. I would say it's better than the Peril. I would also say it's slightly better than the Carnal. Maybe not better than the Direwolf, because the Direwolf can form packs and hunt more efficiently. So yeah, I'll put it there. The Scout, I mean, I guess it's useful, but I don't often find myself using it on Extinction. I don't know, it's just, the concept is nice, of like a drone, but in practice it's not really all that useful. So I don't know, it's probably gonna go in low B tier, or maybe even the C tier. I don't think it's that useless, it doesn't really cost a lot to make this thing. So I'll probably put it, yeah, I'll probably put it just ahead of the Ichthyornis. The Shadow Mane is probably one of the strongest, you know, combat creatures in the game. Yeah, that's about it. Horrible taming method. You really have to suffer to get this thing, but once you do, you're basically unstoppable. The Snow Owl is also one of my favorite creatures. It's, you know, it's excellent. I mean, it's an excellent transportation creature and scouting creature, because, you know, it has decent stamina, and it can, of course, activate its special heat vision, which is pretty useful when you're trying to spot creatures. And also it can heal other creatures. Now, it's not as effective at it as the Daedon, but often it's serviceable enough. The Spinal, I also really like the Spinal. I think the Spinal might be better than the Rex. Yeah, I mean, there are certain situations where the Spinal is better than the Rex, and there are certain situations where the Rex is better than the Spinal. I'm gonna overall put the Spinal ahead of the Rex by a little bit, just because I prefer it over the Rex. But yeah, there are definitely situations where one is better than the other. So the Stego got better ever since it got its buff, but I still often don't find myself using it. I guess it's still a fine creature. It's probably gonna be high B tier. Yeah, I would say, is the Stego better than the Mammoth? I think the Mammoth is overall still more useful. So I'll put it just behind the Aloe. The Tapajara is also pretty useful. I mean, I wouldn't say it's quite A tier, but it's definitely somewhere in high B tier. The Text Rider, you know what I said about the Dodo being the best creature in the game? I think I've repented for that. I think the Dodo is actually not great. I mean, I'd still rather have it over the Diplodocus. But it's time for the real best creature in the game to take its crown. I believe the Strider, you know, the Mantis might be my favorite for its versatility. But the Text Strider is like the Mantis on steroids. It, you know, can instantly harvest everything you see in front of you and carry it to boot. You know, it's not overburdened or anything. You can get it pretty easily on Genesis 2, just clear a couple of missions. And you can tame a low level with both the harvesting attachments. And that basically sets you up for just, you know, that's basically your gathering creature for the entire playthrough on that map. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, and in combat it's also got specific headgear and, you know, body pieces for combat. Now I will say I haven't really tried those out yet, but they're also probably pretty good. So yeah, best creature in the game. The Terror Bird, on the other hand, is very much not the best creature in the game. Yeah, I feel like this guy is kind of just a raptor, but with the ability to glide, and much more difficult to tame since its teleport drops so rapidly. So yeah, I'm gonna put it just behind the raptor. The Ferrigino, I would say the Ferrigino is also definitely an A tier creature. It's up there. I would say it's kind of a mini Rex, but what it lacks in power, I will say, compared to the Rex, but it's much more versatile, and the Spino for that matter, so I'm gonna put it ahead of them both. The Thorny Dragon, you know, I've always liked the Thorny Dragon, but yeah, on Scorched Earth you're gonna be taming this thing. On any other map, not really, aside from maybe Ragnarok. So yeah, I mean, in combat it's not really anything special. It can basically only gather wood, which is done better by other creatures. like I said, it's still a fine creature. I feel like I'm gonna probably put it maybe just behind the Sabertooth. There we go. The Phyla, I think the Phyla is a pretty good creature. It might even crack A tier. Yeah, I think it will probably crack A tier. I think I'm gonna put it just behind the Megalodon. They're kind of similar. So yeah, it of course has its bleed, which is pretty powerful when you're fighting against high health targets. And overall, it's just fast. It's good for getting you around, and it can climb vertical surfaces. So yeah, pretty decent creature. So yeah, the Titan Boa, it's probably going in the C tier somewhere. You know, before these guys were really valuable because their eggs, you know, granted special kinds of kibble that like Rexes preferred. So yeah, but you know, ever since they made them tameable, they also changed up the kibble system. So now their eggs are no different from many others. So yeah, and this guy on its own in combat is not really that great. The Titanosaurus, I mean, this guy is really strong. Probably one of the best creatures in the game. Yeah, there we go. I mean, it's the Titanosaurus. What's there really to say about it? Okay, next up is the Trike, and the Trike is also fine. You know, many people tame a Trike first as like their first tame, their first rideable tame, I should say. I must say, I often find myself being more of a Parasaur guy in the beginning. But the Trike, I will say the Trike is stronger than the Parasaur, but it's also a little bit more difficult to tame. I would definitely say it's up here, maybe. Nah, you know what? Is it better than the Raptor? I think it might be slightly better than the Raptor. Next up is the Trilobite. I don't know why you would tame this thing. It literally does nothing. The Trudel, I think Trudel is fine. It kind of has like the Piranha problem, where it's only kind of effective in large numbers. Against players, even one of these is a nightmare. I think it will probably go somewhere in the high B tier. The Tropiognathus, this thing is basically made good by its saddle. And its taming method is weird, but you know, yeah, it's kind of just a tape Pajara, but with a better saddle. So I guess that makes it better than the tape Pajara, but not by much. I'd say I'd still rather have a Griffin over this thing, and a Trudon as well. The Tuso is probably also an A tier creature, one of the strongest creatures in the ocean. Yeah, I will say I've never really played much with this thing. It doesn't really call to me as much. But yeah, I do think the Basilosaurus is still slightly better, but this thing is undeniably still strong. The Velonosaur, you know, I think the Velonosaur is one of my favorite creatures in the game, but I'm not gonna put it in S tier because it has some very obvious weaknesses. I think it is still a really strong creature. It's probably going somewhere at the bottom here. Yeah, I mean, it's really strong at range. In close quarters, it's a little more underwhelming. You know, its melee attacks are very slow and don't really do a lot of damage. So yeah, but I still like it. The Void Worm. It's kind of just a tech wyvern, and its breath attack is interesting. I mentioned this all the way back in my Genesis 2 review, but yeah, the breath attack in multiplayer is probably really good because you can stun players and like stun creatures and basically just keep them stunned indefinitely. But in single player, it's kind of nearly useless compared to the other attacks, because the stun doesn't work as well on creatures, wild creatures, and it doesn't really do a lot of damage. So yeah, the breath is really underwhelming in single player, but in PvP it's probably much better. So where's the Ice Wyvern is ranked all the way here. I do think it might still be slightly better than the Ice Wyvern, but I don't think, is it worth? Yeah, it's slightly better than the Ice Wyvern. I'm gonna put it at the bottom of A tier for now. The Vulture is fine. I mean, it's just a shoulder pad. It's basically a knockoff version of the Dimorphodon, which is an A tier. Yeah, except this guy is... I'm a little bit easier to tame. I don't really know if I'd call it easier. Because, you know, this guy is a passive tame, I do believe, whereas the Dimorphodon is a knockout tame. It's still going somewhere in the B tier, I think. Yeah, I wouldn't really call it better than these guys. Would I call it better than the Microraptor? I think maybe slightly better than the Microraptor. The Woolly Rhino, I recently tamed one on Fjordur. And I think these guys... I think I've definitely been sleeping on these guys. They can definitely be really strong. Yeah, would I even go put them in the A tier? Maybe not. Or maybe I will. Maybe somewhere in the lower echelon of A tier. Go. The UT-Ren is also a very strong creature. It has its Courage Roar and its Fear Roar, but most people just use this thing for boss fights. You know, in normal gameplay, outside of boss fights, it doesn't really see much use. So I don't really think I'm gonna put it in the S tier, like the Daedon. Because I think the Daedon's ability is more, you know, generally useful, also, you know, in and around the base when you're not doing boss fights. But ultimately, the UT-Ren is still a really good support creature. So then we have some of the creatures that I added in after the fact. So we have the Zombie Dodo, which I think this is basically just a dodo that attacks. I think it has slightly better, I think it has better health and damage than the dodo. I think it's more comparable to something like a raptor. Where's the raptor? I'm gonna put it just ahead of the raptor then, because it has a cooler design. The zombie wyvern is kind of a weaker but faster version of the normal wyverns. It's kind of like the crystal wyverns, except these actually have the breaths of the old wyverns. So in a way, you kind of get the best of both worlds. Now, but you're also frailer and do less damage as a whole. So I guess I'm still gonna put them just slightly ahead of the Void Worm. There we go. The Unicorn, I don't know why I threw this in. It's basically just the same as the horse, but it has a different skin. And then lastly, the Tech Hover Skiff. I thought of adding this in simply because I have the mech and all the other like robotic creatures as well. So yeah, this thing is definitely quite good. It's very fast. You can zip around the map with it, you know, fly around. And you can also pick things up as well and build on it. So it's basically similar to the Desert Titan, but it can't attack itself. So it's definitely more maneuverable and easier to get, but I think I will still put it at the bottom of A tier. I'll put it ahead of the Void Worm, though. And I believe that's gonna be it. I mean, I'm looking through some of the rankings right now, but I think I'm happy with most of my choices. I think I'm gonna make a few adjustments here and there. Okay, yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with this version of the ranking. So now comes the really fun part, where I'm gonna compare the list that I made today to the tier list that I made, you know, the first time I tried to do this, and see if, you know, everything roughly lines up, or if there's, you know, substantial differences. So the tier list that I made the first time about a month and a half ago, I have it on my phone right now. Let me just pull it up, and I will probably put them side by side on the screen in just a moment. Alright, so let's see. I have to zoom in a bit. So the S tier looks largely the same. Yeah, even the order kind of matches up. The Maywing wasn't in there before. Also, most of the creatures in the lower tiers have remained the same. You can see, you know, some familiar faces. Diplo at the end. Yeah, the D and C tier have remained largely the same as well. It's mostly in the B and A tier that some things have shaken up. See, yeah, the RG made a jump from A to S. The Maywing did as well. Yeah, I mean, some of the guys that are down here in C tier right now used to be in low B tier, but I guess I was a little harsher this time around. But for the rest, the tier list looks mostly the same. Previously I put the Rex in B tier and the Spino in A tier. But now, you know, I've made a more nuanced opinion, and the Pharazino also used to be a little bit higher, but now, you know, all three of them are just together. I also used to have the Dung Beetle in A tier as well, but that was before I found out about the trick that you can do with the toilets. And, you know, of course, obviously we didn't have the Andrewsarchus and the Desmodus ranked last time. There were a lot more creatures in the A tier, definitely, last time around that, you know, some of them have fallen down to the B tier, most of them have. A few have actually risen up to the S tier. But yeah, like I said, the lowest and the highest tiers, you know, the extremities, have remained mostly the same, especially the S tier. But yeah, I think that's gonna be it. All the tameable creatures ranked twice, so you know, this time you know it's good. And yeah, if you agree or disagree, then feel free to tell me in the comments. If there are any other Ark related things that you would like me to talk about, then also tell me. And like I said in the intro, if you enjoyed this video and you want to show that support, then be sure to show that support in whatever way you deem fit. Whether that's by liking, subscribing, commenting, I don't really care what you do, as long as it makes us both happy. And yeah, I think I'm gonna go now. Thank you for sitting through this very long video. And yeah, goodbye everyone.